Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Jacob Wagler. Today, we're going to be breaking down a color grade from the movie No Time to Die. Now, I haven't seen this movie, but when I was going through Shot Deck, one of these images caught my eye, and I thought, I think I can make a look for you guys. So let's hop into Lightroom, and I'll show you how I make this look. We're going to take this image and try and go like something like a reference image. And if we just go into our image here, we're going to look at the shadows. So the character and the subject in the image is true black. They have very true blacks. But as you can see here on the windows, from the night scene, what was created was this blue shadow in the image, and then you get kind of like this yellowy pink midtone that would have been created from the sun, and that's kind of what we're going with for light and color. So let's go into our image here and let's pull up a reference here. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit this R and A, or you can hit Control R on your keyboard and that'll pull that up too, but we're just going to drag from the thumbnail up into our image here. And I'm actually just going to switch the view on that by hitting R and A because this is a better horizontal view here. So what I'm just going to do, actually, I'm just going to create a 9:16, and it's obviously going to take me out of my reference view. That's okay. I'm going to go up to original, hit 16:9, sorry, 16:9. We're going to go with that, crop. Okay, now let's hit this R plus A. We have our reference view back. So what we're going to start with here is we're going to first control our highlights. So as you can see, all the highlights are very dimmed down, and we really have to make this scene a whole lot more punchy. So I'm just going to start with the exposure, bring that exposure down, bring down the highlights. Okay, so as you can see from this top image here, and if we look here, the highlights are actually very close now. So we're going to pull down the whites here even more to kind of get like the granular look up in the sky here. And I'm just going to go a little bit more on the highlights. Yeah, something like that. So just by doing this, by the exposure, highlights, whites, we really started to pull in our look here. So we're gonna go into the shadows. I think we're gonna pull up the shadows a wee bit, because if we look at our subjects here in the image, there are shadows, like you can see more detail within the subject, which in our subject you can't really see much. So I'm gonna pull up the shadows a hair here and pull down the blacks, but it's gonna be a push and pull game between the blacks and the shadows, because we really need to dip down our blacks, and a lot of this will be done within the tone curve to get like those really deep blacks, but you do have some of these highlights coming in on top of the subject. So what we're going to do is we are going to boost up the contrast here even more, boost up the shadows, and we're going to boost the clarity a smidge, not much. And okay, so I think I'm pretty happy with where we're going there with this image. So I'm just gonna close out of the basic tab, and let's go into, actually let's adjust the tone curve after. So let's go into our colors here, and we're gonna start pushing. I'm just gonna be pushing the blue and trying to achieve the blue that I'm seeing within this window. And I know that we're gonna have to try and push more towards the purple, but I'm just looking at the blue here in the window, and we'll probably end up pushing more of this purpley pink within the color grading tab. So we're gonna go to the blue, and we're gonna start pushing that more towards like purpley color. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna punch in, just check this here, not go too crazy. Let's boost up the sat here. So we're gonna have to really look up at the top part of our image here, and let's pull down the luminance on the blue. Okay, and then let's go to the purple here, and not seeing it doing much. Okay, so we are getting a little bit of bleed of like this purpley look into our rider shirt. So I'm just gonna dip it a little bit more blue, just so that we're not losing that blue, because I'm okay with the rider shirt being more blue because it was a night scene. So we're gonna go with that, and let's just deal with some of these highlights. So let's look at the orange. So if we go with the orange, we're obviously going to have to push more of like that reddy pink tone because that's what's being introduced. We don't want to leave too much of this out because that will be kind of crucial to like this mid-tone scene here. So we're going to push down the yellow to about -15. And okay, now let's get really creative here. Let's close that out. Let's go to the color grading tab. And let's deal with the highlights here. So the highlights are definitely going to be a challenge. So I'm gonna push all the way over to hue 330 and let's try this to start. Okay, so this is really starting to push in our look here. Okay, so it's pushing in more of like a pinky red tone within the highlights, which I think is starting to achieve the look that we want. So we're gonna go to the midtones here, and I'm thinking our midtones are gonna be pushed more to the blue. Like I'm just looking in at the city here, and I'm noticing that they're more blue. I think they're gonna fade into the shadows. So let's go and push more of like that deep purpley blue into the midtones here. And let's go and push. Okay, so if we go to hue 235, then we have the sat at, I'm gonna pull it back to about 20. Let's turn this off and on, off and on. Yeah, it is actually really affecting our image, which in a good way, because these highlights are starting to bleed more into like that blue tone. And so I think as we push these shadows, so we're gonna go to hue, probably something very similar to about hue 230. Let's go about that. And let's push some of these shadows here. Get those shadows really dipped. And we're gonna have to really probably push our shadows towards this purple here. So we're gonna have to pull back our shadows to about, let's go about 20. Let's turn off the eye tool and turn it back on, off and on, off and on. So let's turn our blending up and watch what this does. So what this does is it really starts to push a lot of this pink into the scene, which is really good. I still think that these highlights up in this corner here are actually a little bit too bright. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go up, I'm gonna pull down the highlights even more, pull down the whites even more. So we're really crushing our highlights and our whites to, okay, so I'm going -90 for the whites, -94 for our highlights. And I'm actually just gonna pull up the exposure a bit because I think that's actually really gonna help with this. So now I think what we can do, I'm gonna leave my exposure at about -0.75, and then I'm gonna go into the tone curve. This is where we're gonna start pushing a lot of like these deep blacks and like really get this punchy here. And we're gonna create a bit of a linear gradient to kind of feather out the bottom to make our subject more noticeable. But let's go and make a point for the shadows, midtones, highlights. Let's dip down our shadows here. Okay, that's helping a lot. Okay, so I'm just gonna go to about 50% here, punched in. And as we dip those shadows, I need to pull up the midtones here. So I'm just looking at my rider's shirt, seeing what is going to make the difference here. Maybe what I need to do is pull up a little bit on the tail, pull down. Okay, so as I look at this shot here, you are seeing a bit of detail in there, and in my rider, I think I am seeing that detail too. So, okay. Now let's go to the highlights here. I'm noticing that my highlights are even a wee bit still too much. So I'm gonna pull those down, really flatten those, and pull down the head on this S curve, back out, back out. Yeah, that's actually really coming together. Okay, so what I'm going to do I think here is I'm going to probably go into my blue curve here, pull into my rider, because I want to see the seat and his pants, because there is a little bit of blue being introduced, and that's obviously just because we introduced some blue into the scene. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to make another point for like those deep black tones and pull that down even more. And watch, look at the seat as I do this. So if I go up, it's introducing more blue, but once I pull down, we're starting to see the true blacks that we see within this shot here. So I'm gonna back out, and I think what I want is I really want my rider and the shirt not to be picking up so much of this blue. It's starting to look like it's a little bit too much, so I might actually just pull a little bit of those mid-tones down. Yeah, it's actually doing a bit. Okay, I'm gonna pull the shadows down a hair and up. Okay. Okay, so this is what my blue channel looks like in the tone curve, and I think I'm happy with that. So what I'm gonna do is let's go into our mask, and then let's pull out, create a linear gradient here, and let's darken the bottom of the scene here quite a bit. And then let's push a little bit of blue into that bottom there and darken it up. Let's pull that out. Okay, let's turn the eye off and on, off and on. So I'm gonna pull out again, pull the mask down, just so I can see more of my subject here. Pull in. Okay. So as you can see, this actually is really taking on this look, which I'm pretty happy about. I mean, let's just look, for example, what would be the whites within this frame. So the whites would be stuff like the lights here, or even probably the reflection wasn't fully picking up this entire tone. And it's really difficult to try and manage the whites within my scene, but if we really think about what a natural scene would look like, the whites within this scene would be picking up more of that blue, and even some of those highlights. And his skin tones are actually still fairly corrected. They're still good. The yellow, obviously, like we could pop that a little bit if we wanted to, but I think that this scene overall is actually picking this up. I think the only thing that we're missing is grain, because this scene obviously has a lot of grain to it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to effects, we're gonna go to grain, and let's punch into our scene a little bit more here. And let's actually just punch into this scene too. So I want to capture very similar grain. So we're going to turn down the size on the grain, because the grain actually looks smaller. And somewhere around there. And let's turn down the roughness to about 45. Turn up the amount to about 20. Okay, now as for maybe a vignette to kind of like capture more of our subject, like I can see that there's a wee bit of a vignette on the outside of this image here. So I'm gonna actually create a very similar vignette like that. Let's dip our midpoint more into our subject, pull the vignette back. And okay, I'm gonna turn this vignette off and on. Off and on. I like that. I like what that's doing to our image here. So as for this image, I think what's really difficult is obviously like there's reflection of the blue, and like the city is blue. I think, you know, maybe we could add a little bit more blue into our scene, like within the natural scene. So let's go to color grading. Let's push a wee bit more blue. Let's see what we can do here. Let's push the color, the hue of it more to about hue 226. Let's push it back. So always go a little bit more and then push it back just to see what you can get away with. And I think I'm happy with that. Let me just go into my rider here and we're gonna go to the tone curve again. Just wanna make sure that those blacks are true still. So pull down a little bit on like this lower black point. So push back out. Let's turn this off and on. Oh my word, that's crazy how much that does. Yeah, so like we really created a very similar look. Like if there was to be a sunset, I know one thing that is really kind of drawing my eye is these tones up in here. And so I think maybe what I could do actually to decrease the sat on those parts is go into my color tab. And I'm actually just going to turn down the saturation on the reds and a slight bit on the orange. There we go. Okay, I'm actually going to pull down the luminance on the orange a bit too, because that is really what's affecting that. I'm going to pull up the luminance just a hair on those yellows, because it is like slightly washed out, that tone up in there, and I think we captured the same brightness. Maybe we could boost up the luminance just a hair bit more. There we go. So I mean, overall, for the tone of the image as well as the brightness and things like that, I think we really achieved a solid look here, and I'm pretty happy with that. I think maybe what I could do is the sky is a little bit more purple up in there, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to create another mask, radial gradient, just go over this spot in the image here, just over this spot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that tint a little bit to the right, pull down the sat a wee bit on this area, a little bit more to the right on the tint, sat down, and then let's pull up those shadows a wee bit here, and a little bit up on the exposure. Okay, let's go to the mask. Yeah, so now we have a very similar tone for the outer part of the sky here in that image and within our image. Overall, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go full screen here. Let's go L on our keyboard, hit before and after. Look at how much we can pull that image. That actually just blows my mind. That is the power of RAW right there. That is the power. It's so incredible. That's crazy. Before and after. If you like this video and you want to see more cinematic looks like that, leave a comment below and I'll make more videos just like this. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. Peace.